Okay, so what I'm going to do in this, I think, is at first I want to ask you, some things about psi particularly, and then I want to speak some about its implications for our understanding of consciousness and things like that. So I guess the first question I have is about your previous book. You gave it the title, The Conscious Universe. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to ask, what does it mean to say that the universe is conscious? In what sense?
It refers to the fact that we appear to be conscious and we're part of the universe. So at least some piece of the universe has evolved in such a direction as to make itself aware of itself. So there's the conscious universe. It would be not only anthropomorphic, but the height of hubris to imagine that we're the only thing in the entire universe that is conscious, or that what we experience as consciousness or awareness in particular is as good as it gets. Mm. I can easily imagine that there are forms of awareness which are many orders of magnitude more discerning and more capable of pulling in large amounts of information that, by comparison, our conscious awareness is the thinnest veneer on the top of a much larger unconscious. So I'm imagining a creature with a much bigger brain or body or something in which all that filtering doesn't take place. The size of the veneer, in other words, is much, much thicker, maybe all the way down. Mm. So what that sort of awareness would be like is something that we would find very difficult to imagine. But if I had to imagine it, I would imagine it would be something similar to what the mystics describe, except it would be actually a lot better than that.
A lot better than even what the mystics describe.
Yeah, because in a sense, you see, the mystics have a problem in that once you get out of the realm of common sense, language fails. And so they do their best with metaphors and poetic language to describe what it's like to sense the entire universe. But my suspicion is that they're really not sensing the whole universe. They're getting something, like an inkling of it. But you can't take the whole universe and sort of filter it down into a little tiny point that we call our brain and make it go through there and come out as language. So that's why I think that a different sort of creature would have a much richer sense of what it means to be aware, and also of what it can be aware of.
That's great. So potentials for greater and greater consciousness, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it conceivably, a mystical state of awareness. I'm using awareness, by the way, more than consciousness, because consciousness has so many different levels to it that oftentimes we don't know what we're talking about. Whereas awareness seems to be the one thing that everyone can agree on that makes it particularly peculiar. It's that we are aware of something, this recursive element of it. So if a mystic describes awareness of some sort of cosmic unity state, I can almost imagine that something like pure awareness or awareness by itself might exist in some way. In which case, the question is, could it expand out to actually include the entire universe? A priori, I don't see any reason why it couldn't. But I can see that it would then become virtually impossible to describe what that feels like. So what we read, if one has not had that experience, all we can gather then is what other people have written about it. And what they write about, as they will even admit, is not it.
Okay, so shifting to psi and some of the things you write about in your book. As you say, in the conscious universe, you say that the evidence from thousands of experiments essentially makes an irrefutable case for the existence of psi. So last week I was, I think the week before last, I was sitting down over tea with Susan Blackmore, and somewhere along the way I brought up her sort of notorious past as a parapsych researcher turned skeptic, and And I kind of nudged and said, well, do you think things have gotten anywhere with psi research? And, she just point blank looked at me and said, there's no truth to any of it. There's no evidence for any of it. I devoted 30 years of my life to studying it, and I didn't find anything in any of it. So I'm just curious why, if the evidence is so clear, because I don't have certainly the time to review the thousands of experiments. I can just look at the summaries that people like you put together or Sheldrake put together. But why, if it's so clear, why would somebody see it so strongly the other way?
Well, part of the clue is the degree of vehemence that a skeptic will use in denying that there's anything interesting going on. That means that the question you've asked assumes that people are rational, and it assumes that the scientific process is rational. But of course it isn't. A large chunk of, at least science nominally, is a rational, logical process that involves deduction and induction and all the rest. The methods probably are as rational as we know how to do. But when it comes to interpreting the evidence, rationality is left outside. Mm-hmm. So when you get people who have very strong opinions on either side, which unfortunately is what media often does when they're trying to get at a controversial topic, they take both ends of the spectrum. And all that will guarantee is that you end up with people on both ends who will argue vehemently that their method is correct, because in many ways they literally see it that way. The problem is, how do you find somebody who is truly neutral in the middle of a controversy? And the answer is you can't. So this is why controversies tend to persist for a long, long time. I don't think I'm anywhere near as pegging the end of the spectrum as Sue is. I like to think of myself more as a centrist, but then again, everyone thinks of themselves as a centrist.
I'm perfectly reasonable and rational and unbiased.
Well, it's obvious that they're all kind of nutty. The way that I describe the nature of the evidence, by the way, I've never used the word irrefutable.
Okay, I was kind of paraphrasing the sense I got more than trying to quote you directly. So, okay.
The word I use and that many of my colleagues use is, the phrase is something like, this evidence evaluated by the same standards as used in the behavioral, social, and medical sciences establishes that side effects are real by the same standards. The only reason that it's not accepted by the mainstream is because there is no clear theoretical reason to accept it. That is the only reason. And exactly the same thing could be said for homeopathy and cold fusion and a bunch of other areas where there is actually a lot of experimental evidence. The experimental evidence, taken all by itself, as pristinely rationally as we can, presents a very strong case. But it's not accepted because people don't know how to explain it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. So, in my next book, I'm spending much more of the book, probably half of it, on the theoretical side, because I think it has actually been the case that up until around 20 years ago, there was no theory that could even plausibly account for this kind of thing without having to make wild leaps of speculation. But now we do have a theory, and you can sort of point to 1982 as the experimental verification of non-locality as an actual experimental and observable fact. That changes the playing field dramatically.
Okay, well, that was actually my next question, was asking because in the conscious universe you lay out several possible theories that have been put forth, and I just was curious how your own thinking has evolved since then, and if you do feel there's a more convincing theory or explanatory model available to us at this point.
As I put in that article I wrote in Shift, I think what's happening is that our explanatory compass has stopped spinning wildly, and it's beginning to settle down and point in one particular direction. That's my assessment of the current state of theory. That when it's spinning wildly, it's everyone coming up with every possible thing you can imagine because no one really had any way of imagining it. And now it's beginning to settle because ultimately the mystery in psi is a mystery about physics. The mystery is something somehow got inside your head that didn't come through the senses, or the ordinary senses, and transcends time and space in some strange way.